1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, and welcome to the Vininspo podcast with me, Ed Merrison. This is where wine is a travel experience. Join us as we pick up bits and pieces, make new friends, and create memories that make our future interactions with wine, people, and places all the more meaningful and fun. My guest on this week's podcast is Kathleen Quealy. With her husband, Quealy-McCarthy, Kathleen was the founder of Gallant Winery on the Mornington Peninsula, which they sold to start the Balnarring-based Quealy label almost 20 years ago. We talked about steamy love affairs among the vines in tropical Queensland, being bestowed queenhood for services to Pinot Gris, bottling line bonding with the Māori and Maltese, challenging the status quo, navigating life as a rain-soaked, wind-swept deckhand on the Mornington Peninsula, how to run a business when you're clearly not business people, the rewards a bit of wine-growing risk reap for the drinker, making way for the next generation, late-picked skin contact and the smell of drama, and how a dash of luck and the power of two can make a dream come true. I started by asking Kathleen to take me back to the start.
I've got to tell you, Ed, that was a long time ago. And I don't think I can be very exact, except for my location. And when I was very young, I lived in Haberfield in Sydney, which was the first suburb that had a backyard out of Sydney in the western suburbs. When we lived there in the mid-60s onwards, I would say nearly everybody in the suburb was either nearly dead from old age or Italian. So it was a very good mix.
And did you have siblings?
I had 2 sisters and 4 brothers. And there were just heaps and heaps of kids, remember, in the old days, and that's how we all lived, and you were allowed out the front door and all that stuff. So I think you saw a lot, and none of it was curated. You just saw everything that happened in walking distance or bus distance of your life.
And growing up with sort of observations, therefore, of other members of the community, but other families and how they lived.
Yeah,
a lot of interaction.
Yeah, completely. And so I think that's how you end up being the person you are. But I don't think it was particularly curated. I think kids' lives are a bit more curated these days.
And what about at school? What kind of interests did you have and what kind of aptitudes did you have as a child?
No interests and no aptitude. That is a fact.
I'm not sure that could be entirely true, but
True.
Obviously you've opted for a profession that keeps you outdoors a lot. Yeah. Were you an outdoorsy type? Were you interested in nature?
I don't think we even knew what nature was. I was very interested in being out of the house, and I was just a classic naughty person. That's all. Very, very naughty person. And when I was very young, I was very interested in the Italian culture that I saw in my suburb, and I was always very interested in people who spoke different languages and came from different places, because I think it's challenging and it's got a lot of reward. And so when I was young, I did watch people make things because people made things, and so I thought, I want to make something when I got older. And I was very young when I decided I wanted to be a winemaker. And that is inspired by the fact that my parents would open up a bottle of beer once a year on a hot day, and that was the sum of alcohol in my parents' life.
Right. So that presumably then came from a little bit of observation of immigrant lifestyle.
Just watching people make wine in their backyard.
Right.
Very funny thing to be interested in.
Yeah.
Did really like the fermentation process, and just was very interested in it. And then that very funny combination where there wasn't a lot of winemaking in Australia, but the new course had opened up at Wagga Wagga, which is now Charles Sturt University, but in those days, I think it was Wagga Wagga Agricultural College, or it was College of Advanced Education. And you didn't need very high marks to get in, and I certainly didn't have very high marks and got into this winemaking course. The only proof you had to have was that you were in the wine industry. And my parents were able to know someone who worked at McWilliams in Piedmont. They had a giant bottling line there, and I worked on the bottling line there. And I loved it. I loved working on a bottling line. I loved working with people who were either great, big, sort of New Zealand warriors, or these women from, I reckon they were from Malta. I don't even know if Malta still exists. And, you know, working on a bottling line, I just loved it. And then there were maybe a couple of people kind of my age, boys, who could speak English, and you'd walk across the road to the pub once a week and have a drink. Just different world, really.
Yeah. Were you old enough to drink when you started that job?
Yeah. I was 18. I'd finished school, and I didn't have it long. I only had it for maybe 8 weeks, 10 weeks, just to prove I could do it so I could get into this course at Wagga. But while I was there, I managed to sort of break everything, and I was a disaster, absolute disaster. I broke things. I didn't know the opportunities I was given. I was a terrible person.
I gather as well, we were talking with, who was it? I think David Lloyd. No, Jeff Weaver was talking about his bottling experiences when he was back at Harley's in the old days. It was quite a dangerous job at times with his sparkling, he said, not a lot of health and safety. So you're breaking stuff, but presumably you're putting yourself in harm's way as well.
There was no health and safety. But another thing about bottling lines, which is the older generation, which I would put myself in, is bottling lines were slower. So they actually took up a lot of your time. If you were in the wine industry, you spent a lot of time on a bottling line. And I think it's different now. It's kind of funny, but if you go and talk to, I don't know, all the people I know from the wine industry, we all have bottling line anecdotes because we all spent so long on a bottling line. I mean, our business now, I'd say there'd be 8-10 days a year of bottling line. In the old days, 30-40 days a year of bottling line, because they're so fast now.
Yeah, right. So now it's just boring, repetitive, everyone hates it, but in those days, at least you got a good story out of it.
I don't know if anything's boring. That's the thing, you know. I don't know if anything's boring. That said, I wouldn't go on a bottling line now, but you know, when you're young, nothing's boring.
What about Wagga then? Was that boring?
Oh, no. It was just great. And, of course, it was a very interesting era. They had all those very clever teachers from around the world who had been tipped out of whatever industries or situations. We had a mathematics teacher who, you know, he'd worked at NASA. I think we had a couple of NASA teachers there. So it was very interesting, and they were very high quality teachers, and I think we learnt a lot about the wine industry.
Did you have any other female peers when you were at Wagga Wagga?
Yeah. I always say the wine industry is, when there's money somewhere else, the men will go out and get those jobs and women are allowed in. And then when there's no money, the men come back into the wine industry. So there was myself, Janice MacDonald, who of course is a preeminent winemaker in Australia. Yeah, there were a couple of girls there, a couple of women there. Yeah.
How long was the course?
Oh, it's just a classic 3-year applied science degree. Nothing flash.
And when did you start to get your first experience in wine? From internships there? Were there opportunities?
Yeah. I did a viticulture internship there, and it was just expected that you'd go out and work, and of course everybody just went out and worked.
Where did you go?
Just places in Australia. And by the end of it, I wasn't very good at anything I did. I just turned up, hung out with people, you know.
Did you enjoy it? Well, I mean, you hadn't really given yourself many other options, but watching people make wine in their backyards was why you went there. Did it feel like where you should be, and that idea of the career that you were going to get?
Oh, yeah. The moment I went, I mean, I love working on the bottling line at McWilliams. And then when I was at college, I used to try and spend as much time as I could there because they had a working winery and a working vineyard. And then at the end of that year, I worked for Arrowfield in the Hunter Valley with Gary Baldwin, and I just loved it. I always loved working in the wine industry because it's just like working in a big Meccano set or Lego set. You just sort of clamp things together and stick them into a pump, and everybody loves working in a winery. Everyone loves working in a winery. It's a fact.
What happened after Wagga then? Where did you start? Where did your career begin?
Oh, no. Never had a career. Never had a proper career. So I just sort of, did all that. And then took me years to do my degree because I failed everything. But eventually got through to the end. I don't know. This is all a bit dull. But by the time I think we were 25, 26, we came down to the Mornington Peninsula for a holiday. And I just thought this place was fantastic. It had just started. Stonius was there. LG Park was there. I knew the girl, Elaine Tudhope. She was the winemaker at LG Park, and she made the Stonia wines as well. So long ago, I might even have the names wrong. We went to a few other places, and I just thought this place was just amazing. And I already had that big interest in growing cool climate grape varieties because Australia had a big interest in Cabernet, Shiraz, Riesling, Chardonnay. And I was really interested in doing cool climate grape varieties. Of course, my big interest was Pinot Gris because of my background in viticulture from college. And we came down here and that's what we did, basically. We put in a whole lot of Pinot Gris vineyards.
And we is you and Kev?
That's with Kevin, my husband, Quealy-McCarthy.
And when did you meet?
My first proper job as a winemaker was in Stanthorpe in Queensland, and Kevin had a job up there in another winery.
Both most Irish names that you could come across.
We're like they're just beauties, aren't they? Quealy-McCarthy and Kathleen Quealy.
Is that what you talked about?
No, but we had a great time. Stanthorpe was a very beautiful place. Once again, the wine industry up there has got a huge Italian influence. And I always remember going up there and having just finished college, and I just tut-tutted all these lovely Italian people and said, rip out all those terrible grape varieties you've got there. You should be planting Cabernet, Shiraz and Chardonnay. But it's all right. No one listened to me. I was 22 at the time, so no one cared. But the same thing, they did a lot of stuff that was very stylish and tender, and you just pick it up and remember it as a way of thinking. I think it was at the very end of an era. It makes you just feel so old. The train line went from wherever, but it went through Stanthorpe all the way up to the cane fields of the top of Queensland, and all their Italian cousins lived up there, and they had these barrels and they'd fill them with Shiraz because that was their preferred variety, and then they would top it with liqueur muscat and then put a bung in it and send it up to, I don't know, Ingham or wherever they do, and then they would come down empty, and at the train station people would pick up their empty barrels. I mean, that's pretty nice to know that happened in your lifetime.
Yeah, totally.
That's pretty slow wine.
And we'll talk, hopefully, plenty about Kev and his attributes and interests and input. But what kind of young man did you meet in Kev? Was he an irreverent, rebellious kind of person when you met him, or was he applied and diligent? Kevin
was very smart, and he'd gone to Roseworthy, and he had a lot of very smart friends who we still see, and they all knew their chemistry very well. Yeah, but Kev's pretty wild. Always has been. Kevin is a wild man. Yeah. You have to be, otherwise you wouldn't be in Queensland. You'd be in a proper place making wine. So
I guess so.
But it was a proper place. But I'm just saying, as a young person, you wouldn't have gone there, would you? You would have gone, oh, I better go to Adelaide or get a job with Penfolds or maybe in the McLaren Vale or off to the Hunter.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that left field ideas are going to come up a fair few times between the two of you. And one of those, I suppose, itself was the idea of Pinot Grigio. You said that you were already interested in this cool climate.
I was very interested in it when I was at college at Wagga, because the viticulturist was Max Loder, and Max Loder famously said that Mr. Hitler stole his youth from him. And so he came over here in the 50s from Germany and did a lot of really interesting viticultural work in Wagga. He did a lot of interesting work in the Barossa Valley, and then he was invited to head up the Wagga Wagga with Brian Crozer and Tony Jordan. And it was great because he had a different point of view. He had a different point of view from Australian viticulturists at the time. And he put in a very big variety collection. And he always said collections should never be museums. They should be active and make wine with them and look at them and understand their viticulture and innovate. He had put in Pinot Gris because he saw it as a premium variety, along with Riesling, Semillon, Shiraz, Cabernet, Sauvignon Blanc. And of course it was met with ridicule with all the Aussies, and it was always just a source of fun. But it's a very beautiful grape variety if you look at it in the vineyard, because it's neither white nor black. It goes a beautiful hot pink colour. So it was very beautiful to look at in the vineyard. And I guess I was a bit hooked, and I always thought if you took it out of the heat of Wagga and put it in a cool region, it would be very successful. And remember, in those days, no one gave a toot about Pinot Noir either, because cool climate viticulture didn't mean anything in Australia. And Max used to say there's no money in cool climate viticulture because there's no land in cool climate viticulture. So I was really aware of that. And then cool climate viticulture became a thing because of Estonia, because of LG Park, Mount Mary, Seville Estate, and other players. I can't remember them all. And I was really interested in that. And then we came down here and I thought, well, if we're going to do cool climate viticulture, we should do Pinot Gris. I had very little awareness of Pinot Noir. Kevin's first job was he worked with Halliday in the Yarra, and so he learned a lot about Pinot Noir there. And then we came down to the Mornington Peninsula, and Kevin worked for Hickenbottom, and we had a little job at Kings Creek, which was one of the first Pinot Noir vineyards down here as well. So we learned a lot about Pinot Noir. We learned quickly that Cabernet was not viable. We understood Chardonnay. There was Chardonnay being planted here. And then we just launched on that. People should plant Pinot Gris down here because it's more like Pinot Noir and it doesn't require the wood that you need in Chardonnay to make it attractive. And that was really our proposition. And I think it's interesting because customers love Pinot Gris, despite the fact that the wine industry still ignores it. And the wine press still give it 5 points less than they will ever give a Chardonnay. And it's been hugely successful in the Mornington Peninsula. And I think other regions have found their own versions of it as well.
Yeah, you've made the point before that it's a grape variety that hasn't typically been given favour. And essentially I think this is a bit of a theme of quite a lot of, wine. It's the way that the status quo tends to stick because it gets so much backing. And of course, something like Pinot Gris, to use its, I suppose, Alsatian background, was never the favoured grape variety for the Germans who instilled their own favourites on their side. And it's sort of a story of that, isn't it? Being neglected. And as you said, in Max Loder's collection, it was overlooked because it wasn't the Bordeaux variety or it wasn't the Rhone variety. It was from somewhere else.
I don't know. You probably have better history, but my understanding is because Alsace is so fought over that Germany would go in and pull out or ignore Pinot Gris and put in Riesling. But the French always like Pinot Gris.
Yeah, and I think it's a factor of marketing as well, that those are the varieties that they push forward as being the elite choice, I suppose. But then as soon as you potentially shine a light on some of these things, as you have done with Pinot Gris, it's gone from nothing in the 90s to being certainly a much bigger concern for a lot of people in terms of production, in terms of popularity, as you say, still not really given the respect by a lot of people.
No, it's not given the respect by the winemakers, and I think they still stretch it out with whatever rubbish they can find, but customers love it. What's interesting, Pinot Gris, of course, is Pinot Noir. It's just it doesn't have as much colour as Pinot Noir. What's interesting about Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir, because they were both latecomers to that international set that America fell in love with and we fell in love with. So the beginning of the international set was Cabernet, Riesling, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, then Chardonnay. Chardonnay was later. All those varieties are high acid. So you could put them out in those boiling hot paddocks of Australia and America, and you could still come out of it with some acid in the wine, which really suited particularly the wine industry in America and Australia, which had a love affair with the pH meter at the time. and so did demand a certain level of acidity. Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris were both latecomers. And I think one of the reasons why is because when they try to apply those varieties to most of Australia and America, it was a failure because they don't have any acid and they do have high pH. So it was a disaster for many years until they brought Pinot Noir to cool climate Australia. And then once they learn the tricks, they can then go and replicate it in a hotter place and make the adjustments. But it's really cool climate Australia that makes Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris.
And I suppose not just cool climate viticulture, but viticulture itself, I suppose, has also been, i.e. better viticulture, has been a big boon for the quality of Pinot Gris where people do care, which obviously you've put a lot of time and work into.
I think once you get to a cool climate, the big difference between cool climates and warmer climates is site selection's everything. And if you don't have a good site, you can only make ordinary wine.
Just thinking about those early days, where were you getting your Pinot Gris cuttings from? From the original ones at Wagga?
Yeah, so we took the cuttings from Wagga, brought them down here. We made our own nursery because we had that kind of expertise, because that was the kind of stuff you were taught at college in those days. And we probably had 20,000 rootlings. They were cuttings and we turned them into rootlings at Rocky Tellerida's place in Borneo. And that was really the first really big Pinot Gris nursery in Australia, I would say. And then from there, we'd had a property we were going to plant them into, and then it all went bad. And then we reached out. There was the great wine writer, Mark Shield, and he put an article about us looking for people who would plant it on the Mornington Peninsula, and we got 3 people who would plant it. All 3 of those vineyards are still there, which is pretty funny. That's the McCabe's vineyard, which I don't know who leases that now. It would be Paringa or Foxy's have it, I think. The Sergeant's vineyard, which is now Mont Rouge, opposite Port Phillip Estate, and Pig and Whistle Hotel, Pig and Whistle pub in Main Ridge. Yeah. And those vineyards are still there, and it's pretty funny. So they're, I don't know, they'd be 35 years old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you have, just may as well dig into your expertise with this. And I know that Tom, your son, has taken Pinot Grigio, I think you use both names on some of the bottlings, to even greater heights. I mean, those wines are really not just stellar, but also very different and characterful, which again is not something that probably people really think of as in there as a potential for that grape variety, because it hasn't really been pushed that way. What would you say you've learnt since spotting its potential that you can bring out in it? And what are those different expressions that you're growing all about?
You certainly learn a lot on the way. Of course, young vineyards are different to old vineyards because young vineyards throw bigger crops, take longer to ripen because they hold bigger crops, and get a lot of that beautiful late harvest character. Older vineyards have smaller crops. Often you can pick them a little bit earlier. So you're always trying to capture that late harvest character, because that late harvest character is that deep perfume that everybody recognises because you don't just have it in wine. That deep perfume is that smell of drama that you can get in anything. And it is a late picked character. For me, that's very important, that late picked character in Pinot Gris. When we made them, I don't think I had the same skill set that I think Tom has. We made them in stainless steel. Tom makes them in barrels now, but good barrels, not just burnt out old shabby barrels, beautiful barrels. I'd say he presses them a little bit harder, which I think's made better wines. It probably gives them a little bit more tannin, which is yet another dimension that can be oxidised and moved around while it's maturing in barrels and provide more texture and more mouthfeel. No movement. Tom doesn't move those wines at all. So we used to rack them a lot because I was interested in making wines that had a lot of air in them. But Tom doesn't move them, and I think they're better wines for it.
Yeah, I suppose as well, the whole package that Quealy's become in terms of organic viticulture and slow wine growing, slow wine making, that those wines are spontaneously fermented. They have solids, they have time, they have the whole grape used a little bit more, and a lot of confidence as well. But also, as you say, the vineyard, the vine age, the actual pedigree of the vineyards is really celebrated as well, which has led Pinot Gris to show those things that people love about Pinot Noir in terms of the differences in the Mornington Peninsula sites as well. So it's interesting that you both have that complexity of the fruit itself and the way that that's used in a total opposite from a reductive, simple, aromatic white wine making style. A lot more involved, slow process of fruit maturation, I suppose.
And risk. You've got to put risk in there because risk makes your wine better.
Takes you somewhere interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And they are, I do think, fantastic. Pinot Gris wines, and I think you've obviously proven a point over time. Going back again in time, though, to where you started the business together, what were the early days of that like? And I was also interested in where the name came from.
Oh, Quealy?
No, before.
Oh, Gallant. Oh, Gallant. We called it Gallant because, we moved down here. Kevin and I got married in those days. People used to get married and we moved down here. And I think you could have called it the honeymoon period. And everything was new and I was so excited about living on the Mornington Peninsula. And then I went, oh my God, it's freezing down here. And it rains and there's no sun. And it's a southern ocean. It's full of sharks and seaweed and churn. And it lost its luster a little bit for me. And I did do a bit of complaining. And I was talking to this man one day who was just a lovely gentleman who lived down here who, had one of those lovely old cooter boats. And I was very interested in those boats because I just thought they were so beautiful. And same thing, I love the culture behind these cooter boats and people fishing and all that stuff. And he said to me, living on the Mornington Peninsula is like living on the deck of a ship. And I thought, what a great thing to say. That is exactly what it's like because it's just cold and miserable and windy. And so when we wanted to call our first wine brand the name, I thought, well, we'll be inspired by that. And Kevin's dad was a man of few words but loved ships. And he said, well, call it Gallant. In fact, he said, call it Top Gallant. And then Leon Massoni, who was a great restaurateur in Melbourne, said to us, call it Gallant. That's how the sailors say the word. So it is lovely. You've got to remember, of course, Gallant now makes Prosecco in a can. That's what happens when you sell out. But we are no longer associated with Gallant. But they were very good to us. They bought it from us. It was great for us.
And when was it founded?
It started, I think, in 1990, and we'd leased a vineyard down here. That was, wait for it, Chardonnay and Malbec. And that didn't worry us.
And so how did the progression of Gallant look from a traction point of view? I mean, was it a business that felt like it was working from the word go, or did it really look like you were just building up and had no idea?
No, it completely worked from the word go because everyone wanted to drink Pinot Gris. So it completely worked. So we used to make unwooded Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, and a little bit of Pinot Noir. It was good, but Kev and I weren't business people. We're still not business people. But most people aren't.
Yeah.
So that's not unusual.
No. And how come everyone wanted to start drinking Pinot Gris? What changed that?
Oh, I think people wanted to drink Pinot Gris because Victorians love drinking Victorian wine. It was a beautiful wine. It was always beautiful. And we used to make it as a Pinot Gris and a Pinot Grigio. And people just loved Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio. And, yeah, we used to just sell out of it every year. We had those 3 vineyards and then we put in more vineyards. It wasn't hard. The Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio bit wasn't hard. People were very interested in it. I think people liked the taste of the wine. It was beautiful, cool climate, white wine. And in Australia, people were still drinking a lot of South Australian white wine, and I think Victorians like drinking Victorian wine.
Yeah, and you had a fair bit of visitation through Cellar d'Or.
I mean, it became a giant cellar door, of course. We had huge visitation, yeah.
So just the simplicity of people getting something in their mouths, in their glasses that they liked.
I think so, yeah.
If only everything was so simple.
Yeah, but keep in mind, we had to sell that business because there was no money in the bank.
Yeah.
So
How have you and Kev sort of worked together? Who does what? Have you always agreed, or do you stay out of each other's way? How does that work?
I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know. I really wouldn't know anymore. I think there's different kinds of partnerships. You have those partnerships where one does the marketing and one does the production, and then you have different kinds of partnerships. And I don't know. As you know, it's changed a lot now because it has turned into a family business, because we do have 5 kids, and our eldest son Tom has worked in the business for at least 10 years now, and he's passionate about it, and he's such a big force in that business.
He is, and I know he's taken certain things forward to the point where, well, you see them more as Tom's things than yours. But obviously, Quealy is seen by a lot of people as having a point of difference, not least because that duopoly of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that people come to expect was not your focus.
Challenged. Yeah, it was challenged. Yeah, but that's a pretty easy to challenge. Is anybody going to think that there's only 2 great varieties in the whole world? I mean, it's a silly thing to think.
It is, but as I say, I mean, you are regarded almost as a radical by challenging that.
Yeah, but not a radical amongst consumers.
No. I was looking at the Essence of Dreams, which I have in front of me here, where you're described as strong-headed and purposeful. Oh. The strong-headed and purposeful Charles Sturt-trained Kathleen Quealy, and also a dynamic force of nature. Huh. Which I think, apart from anything else, it probably does go to the point of within the Mornington Peninsula, which is probably regarded as being a relatively conservative place.
Yes, I think that's more an excuse for not complying with the Pinot Chardonnay duopoly. But don't you think the wine industry, it has to change very dramatically, and it will very soon. And so much of that Pinot Chardonnay duopoly, or even Cabernet, just this whole that there's only 5 or 10 grape varieties in the world that are actually worth pursuing, that are worth you investing your time, your emotion and money in. I mean, a lot of that's supported by fortifying your wine with added tannin, added tartaric acid, added enzymes, boiling it up in new French oak, whatever you're doing in your vineyard to help that happen. And I'm not saying I'm without sin on all that, but there might be a time when people are going to seek wines that are truly natural. And I don't mean natural wine in terms of what we've seen, because that's all just been a bit of a gimmick. I just mean, just making lovely natural wine that you have to use your mind to understand. And maybe it won't happen. Maybe it will.
Well, to a degree, everything's changed, obviously, massively from that regard. My guest on last week's podcast was Max Allen, whose book Alternative Reality, of course, features a really nice double-page spread of you and Kevin. But talking a little bit about Pinot Gris itself and how that's obviously been retired, long since graduated, as they say, from the Alternative Varieties Wine Show. But also a movement that's obviously thriving with like-minded individuals, I guess, pursuing that otherness, but also things that essentially they're not different for the sake of being different. They're actually natural fits, as to use your word. Yeah,
there's lots of it. I mean, we grow a lot of other varieties now. There's lots of it that can happen out there.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you've got growing and how they came to be in the vineyard, because there's a few different things. I first met you actually after tasting Pobblebonk.
Oh, yeah.
Which caught my ear as well, of course, because of the unusual name.
Yeah.
I wasn't so familiar as I am now with the Call of the Frogs, which we hear every night down here, the Pobblebonk chorus from the Banjo Frogs.
Yeah, or whatever they're called.
But, a blend of Riesling, Friulano
and Pinot Gris.
Yeah. Friulano's been an important part of what you do. Yeah. So, just a little bit about those alternative varieties. Well, it's not called that. Those other varieties that you have.
But they are still alternative. So, our vineyard, we planted Friulano there when we bought our property in Balnarring in 2003. Meanwhile, Chalmers had that, you will know the names better than me, but they've got those lovely collections of Italian grape varietals, which so many people in Australia have taken on board, and I think they will just become more and more important. And people will look at a new way of looking at wine, and people perhaps won't be so caught up in just growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So we grow, Friulano was the first one we grew, and we actually got that independently of Chalmers. And then from Chalmers we got the Riesling, which I call Italian Riesling, but I think it's a very, very important variety in Italy. And we got Malvasia, I think is how they say it, Malvasia, and Moscato. And for me, they're all really, really good varieties. And meanwhile, our son, Tom, he had spent a few years doing vintages overseas. He was really interested in making those skin contact wines. So Kevin had made some skin contact wines under Treasury Wines when he still worked for Gallant. And then Tom came back and made it for Quealy. So he made that first Friulano, that Turbo Friulano, and that was in 2011. And then we kept going from there. The Riesling is, I think, Tom's favourite one. And he's done that on skins for 3 or 4 months and then in barrel for 2 or 3 years. And I think that's quite peak. And he's put his second one of those out. So we're up to the 22 of that. And that got bottled a month ago. So I think they're beautiful wines and they're different from Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and we don't even know because there's so little of it. So you don't have that big body of knowledge. But the big difference of them is you come to a region like the Mornington Peninsula, which is very cold. And because it's cold, we have small berries and small bunches. And because it's overcast, there are even smaller berries and even smaller bunches. And these varieties are actually made for cold maritime sites. So they have big berries and big bunches. But because it's cold, they never get that big here. They are picked really late in the season. So you do get that lovely late harvest character and you get a more reliable crop. If you actually have to make a living out of it, it's quite important.
Yeah, as you say, too, the idea of these things being alternative as well. Making red wine with skins is obviously, that's what you do, right? Because it's got flavour and it's got spice and it's got body and it's got
And then, of
texture.
course, you go to Champagne and they don't get enough colour and they go, oh, we might make Champagne with Pinot Noir. So everybody's looking at what they've got, not just us.
And those skin contact wines, they are, I mean, for you, I suppose a little bit of a revelation in how they've gone with Tom. Yeah. The last set last year, you had all 4, I think, Malvasia, Friulano, Riesling, and Moscato.
Yeah, Moscato. Yeah.
All made and phenomenal. And beyond that idea of just an orange wine as an alternative thing, something that's completely itself and really makes the most of its variety and its skins and body and everything else. And
I
time.
Think, and the winemaker's capacity to understand what you can get away with. So you could not top it and maybe it would deepen, become more orange and sherrified. I'm pretty sure Tom tops them so they stay golden. But what I'm saying is there's always risk, and there's that if you're the winemaker, you're understanding where to take the flavour and where to progress the maturation and the fermentation.
And I was looking at something today, I didn't actually read it, but there was a headline of a report or an article someone had written about how technical winemaking or modern winemaking had got to this point where people were making wines with greater maybe prowess and awareness of that endpoint that they have in mind and whether that leads to more sameness. In a way, I think talking even back in the days of Pinot Gris and questioning things goes in a direction that doesn't look at the idea of progress in what you're trying to do as being sameness or a better version of the same thing, but actually like where else might that go? Do you see a sort of certain homogeneity around wines and even ambitions in making wine at the moment?
Not at the moment. For a long time. There is a history in Australia, and our knowledge was shared with America, and it's gone backwards and forwards, which is there's this perfect pH, and you manage your pH largely by the acidification of wine. So there is this perfect pH, which depends who you are, but it'll be somewhere between 3.45 and 3.6. And when you have that perfect pH, there's this other idea in chemistry, says me, who's just told you what a bad student I was, but they have a tipping point, which you could get a more elegant winemaker to tell you about. But you have these tipping points, and there's all these tipping points with pH, and there's a tipping point which is if your pH is higher than that, as wine ages, the pH will get even higher. But if you keep the tipping point under 3.55, as your wine ages, the pH will get less and less. And your pH is caught up in the efficiency of sulfur managing your wine, and your pH dictates the kind of bacteria that run your malolactic fermentation. These were all facts which I think have recently been questioned, but they were facts for decades and decades. And I think a lot of the sameness comes out of that. And then you have that other overlay, which is everything's filtered, and filtration can take in place of time because ultimately wines will stabilise, but not always. So they all make you become the same, don't they? Because everything's filter bright, everything's the same colour, everything's the same pH. And then you have that overlay of wine shows and wine press, and they're very aware of that as well. And then when you line them up, people say, well, you're just trying the wine in the glass. And yeah, when you line them up, perhaps being in the middle, of course, is the best place to be, isn't it? Every time.
Mm.
I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying it's there. I'm not worried about it. But I think that's there. And that's very different to your experience at a table, drinking a glass of wine with your friends.
Or having people come to your cellar door and try your things and get who you are and what you're doing.
But even if you don't explain it to them, it's whether people like your wine or not. But usually when people drink wine, they're not drinking it in a lineup with 20 others.
No. You've mentioned the word risk a few times, and I suppose no matter what else you might say about wine reviews and wine shows, obviously, in a sense, you're trying to lessen your risk sometimes by being uniform, being in that uniform group, but also being calibrated against other things.
I think wine is highly calibrated, and I just think it's highly calibrated. Look, some people make beautiful wine, don't they? Some people make beautiful wine and some people don't, and that's just the way it is. I've never had a wine that's won a trophy that tastes bad, have you? They're beautiful wines.
Yeah.
They're beautiful wines. They're always lovely wines. Yeah.
No, as I say, well, not knocking that, but just saying at the same time, there are probably undeniable effects of that way of thinking, though.
That's what I'm saying.
There's a model, and you're trying to be a facsimile of that model or trying to improve upon it, but your idea of improvement is also taking it in one direction. And also, if everyone else is thinking the same way, that only goes in an ever-narrowing band
that bit I
in
agree
the same
with.
direction.
I agree with that, yes.
And to that point, being different has not entirely been a damaging thing for you. Like, your reputation precedes you as a strong-headed and purposeful person, but also, being the queen of Pinot Gris or...
That was James Halliday. What a lovely gift to give somebody.
That's right.
Queenhood.
That's right, bestowed upon you. At the same time, the Quealy brand, I suppose you probably don't think of it as a brand, but stands out as being a bit different. And you'll probably tend to be put in that slightly alternative left field place where the more, I want to say trendy, but just different, more fatty, natural sort of box is sometimes where you're put. Yeah. I mean, does that ever bug you, or do you just take what you're given in terms of where you're positioned by other people? It's
a bit different now because I can't speak for Tom and I can't speak for Kevin either. So it's a little bit different now, and I think Tom competes very strongly in the orthodox and the alternate, and I think we're very lucky that we can do both. And I think that's from having a lot of knowledge, and I think you get that knowledge by having lived it for so long, I suppose. And I think that's a real advantage.
You were talking the other day about going to a reunion of sorts. And how that had made you think of all the knowledge that was given to you by people already when you were young.
Yeah, exactly.
Or younger, sorry, Kathleen. By younger. People who you already regarded as being veterans in their fields, NASA scientists, what have you. Yeah. And now things have moved a long way. I mean, your son is now in charge of the winery, and you are one of the elder stateswomen, I suppose, of the scene. What do you think about the idea of where that knowledge is now and what things that you've come to sort of really value about the past and that way of winemaking, I suppose, where you had those received bits of wisdom that were hard to challenge, like you were just saying. But at the same time, you kind of had to do everything yourself and find out a lot of stuff for yourself. How does that sort of growing up in that more, almost describing it as film photography in the darkroom with processing your work in a way that was much less controlled than modern science technology has got us?
But I think all that good wine's still made the same way. And we're all wringing our hands trying to work out if there's another way of doing it. But all good wine is hand-pruned, hand-picked. People go through it with their hands and discard and sort out the canopies. It's actually all the same. And then once you put it in the winery, I could be challenged by proper wine scientists, but wine behaves differently. Juice turning into wine behaves differently in a big tank versus a small tank versus a barrel. And fermentations on skins, whether they be the Riesling and the Friulano that we do, or classic Pinot Noirs and Cabernets, they behave differently whether they're in a 1 tonne open vat, 2 tonne open vat, 40 tonne open vat, sealed vat. So a lot of that stuff I don't think's changed in any way. What has changed is Australia was in a hot climate, and then a lot of the premium Australia has gone to a cool climate, which is the Mornington Peninsula, Tasmania, Yarra Valley. Adelaide Hills always likes to put their hands up, but I don't know. I think South Australia always like to help themselves. But then you've got the next big overlay, haven't you, of irrigation. How does irrigation affect the quality of your vines? I think you do learn a lot over the years, and maybe it just makes you look in places and you hope that other people realise it's important to be looking there. Maybe that's all it is. I don't know if there's anything more concrete than that. I think the hardest part is that wine is still made by hand, isn't it? Good wine. You might have a bottling machine, but I think it's all made by hand.
And as someone who got into wine because you loved making things,
Yeah.
how's that panned out in your career in terms of, has it changed? Do you find yourself having to deal with more necessary evils of being in the wine industry, parts of it that you don't enjoy so much? Or do you feel that mostly it has been, you don't want to call it a career, but a career where you have continued to enjoy making things?
No, yeah, I just love the wine industry because I've been in it and I'm good at it. So it's just been great. And I'm happy just to hose down concrete. It doesn't really worry me. Just being around it. I like hanging out with winemakers. It's just what happens to you, I guess.
And you haven't really been able to just sort of describe that, how you and Kevin work together.
Yeah.
What about now that there's you, Kevin, Tom. and others?
Yeah.
Are you working together, or are you just all doing stuff around each other in the same place?
No. I think, you're running a business, and a business you have to make a living. I think you have to give people space, and you have to make way for the next generation. And you have to be supportive, or try and be supportive. I would never force anybody into doing anything. It'd be great if we're still around. And if we're not, it doesn't matter either. But I think Tom really enjoys making the wine. And I think there's a lot of people out there who like us being there. And so I hope it continues. And I think when you're highly active in it, like Tom, your skills accumulate really quickly. And when you start hosing down the concrete and doing wine deliveries, obviously your skill sets are in decline.
The vineyard, Balnarring Vineyard, just give us a little bit of a background on how old those plantings are, when you came into it, and also what's changed.
So we bought Balnarring Vineyard in 2003 when we sold to Gallant Winemakers. Because to Gallant Winemakers, we had a partnership. So we bought Balnarring Vineyard on our own. It had that lovely backstory where when Kevin was a winemaker at Halliday in 86, Dave Wallen, who was the winemaker at Tarrawarra, he was the founding winemaker at Tarrawarra, invited Kevin to come over and have a look at the grapes because he knew Kevin was interested in the Mornington Peninsula. God knows how he knew that, because Kevin was working in the Yarra Valley for Halliday. In any case, I guess that's the kindness of the wine industry, isn't it? And Dave Wallen, of course, is a lovely man and a very good winemaker. And he said to Kev, look at these grapes. These are from the Mornington Peninsula. They are amazing. And these were the Balnarring Vineyard Pinot Noir grapes. So we followed the career of Balnarring Vineyard, and in 2003 we were able to purchase the property. So they're lovely old vines. They're 1982 vines, and they're wide planted, MV6, and of course they have their own personalities. So that's our 17 Rose Pinot Noir. There's some lovely old Chardonnay there, which we've just hived off, and we now make it as Ferry Maris Chardonnay, and we make a Ferry Maris Riesling and a Pinot Gris as well. The Pinot Noir, the Riesling and the Chardonnay are all 1982 vines. It's all certified organic, and it's all dry grown, and it's a lovely vineyard.
Yeah. And since then, you've had the Italian.
And then there was an original Cabernet vineyard, Cabernet Merlot vineyard there. We pulled that out and replanted it with the Italian varietals. And then there was a younger Chardonnay block that we put Friulano on, and a younger Pinot Noir block that we put Pinot Gris in. So we completely moved it around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just remind me again how the Quealy labels came about.
The Quealy labels are designed by Ken Cato, who also designed our Gallant labels. And so he has now designed our labels for, nearly 40 years, I'd say. And as you can see, they're all very beautiful, ornate, off-the-wall labels, which I guess reflects us.
And there's also a thing about the wines, talking about how expensive it is to make wines properly. Obviously land at the beginning, but also grape growing properly.
Yeah.
The fact that, generally speaking, hands do all the work still. There's a real pragmatism to having styles that you can sell at lower prices.
Totally.
And that's been a big thing. I mean, I know that you've probably been selling them for less than you could, perhaps, and should. But at the same time, having those accessible to the public and at prices that they can afford, even before they understand the wine and get a chance to fall in love with it, has been a really important thing. But also, from a practical sense, being able to do that work or find wines that suit your climate, suit your vineyard, suit your way of working, that you still love, has been a really important thing.
I think... Look, you can spend a lot of money on marketing, but I think you can only spend a lot of money on marketing if you're good at it and if you can get a revenue out of it. We have always been committed to try and keep our wines a value proposition because you can sell more and it's easier. Probably
something a little bit about your environmental inputs. If you are actually keeping things cheap, sometimes you're actually doing not less work, but you're working with your environment in a different way that perhaps is a little bit more sustainable.
Well, I just think if you can sell to more people, it's a little bit easier to sell your product.
there is that, to put it very simply.
Yeah.
And talking about marketing, obviously there's, going right back to the beginning of the story, a certain alternative vein of thinking that's gone through what has become, let's face it, a career. It just goes to show how easy it is to be treated as being outspoken just because you have a different opinion, sometimes from an enormous status quo. Yeah. But you are viewed as being, whether you like it or not, quite an inspirational woman in the wine industry. How do you feel about that? Does that confer a certain responsibility on you, or are you just going about things the way you do and how you're seen by other people doesn't really matter?
I don't think I've ever done enough. I've always thought that. I do think it's really hard for women to get into the wine industry properly, easily. So, no, I've never done enough.
But just by doing it, perhaps that's what makes people somewhat inspired to do things differently. Because at the same time, that idea of having a different voice isn't the easiest thing to do. I mean, we're just talking about the idea of risk. Yeah. There is a risk in doing things your own way.
But I think I was very lucky because there were two of us. There was Kevin and I. I think it's a lot easier if there's two of you because then it's a force. If it's one person, it's very difficult. So I think I was very lucky. You can't help but notice in the wine industry it's an industry that requires a lot of capital, and you need the capital to even get the acknowledgement that you need. And I think a lot of people, a lot of wine professionals, they would have been like Kevin and I, you go to uni, you learn how to be a winemaker, you go and work, and then you go, all right, now I'm going to do it myself. But guess what? You can't, because it's sort of like that housing crisis. The price of land's too much. The price of doing it's too much. You can't, there's no bomby little house you can live in while you're trying to make some money. There's no old cool stores to put your wine in that cost you $5 a week. It's all gone. I guess it's more like what Europe was. It's all gone. There is no ability to have an idea and access cheap capital. And I think that's terrible, and that makes it very difficult. It's just difficult. But there's a lot of women in the wine industry now. But I think part of that is because men are probably making more money somewhere else, don't you? But even if they are making money somewhere else, they're not having as much fun as people in the wine industry.
Do you think you have to be a little bit crazy to want to do it, or to think it's going to work out? Do you think you just need to be a bit naive and just get out there and do it?
I don't know. There's some lovely women in the wine industry on the Mornington Peninsula. Maybe you should ask them, see whether they're crazy or not.
I'm not suggesting for a minute.
I know you don't. No, but I've got a feeling people just sort of get into it for some reason, and it's a skill set that is actually very transferable. But the wine industry is lovely, and you get the skill set and then you sort of stay there because it is lovely. It's a lovely place to work, and there's nothing that you can do about it once you're in.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a theme, isn't it? Because we often talk about the tricky things, but at the same time, there's clearly so much that does somehow keep you nourished and give back and surprise you all the time.
Yeah, don't you think? But there's a lot of women on the Mornington Peninsula in the wine industry at the moment, so that's good.
And if you had the chance to do it all over again, would you?
Well, the problem is I wouldn't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of stuck here now.
That's it for this week's podcast. If you enjoyed listening to it, please like, subscribe and share with everyone. Seriously, it makes a big difference. You can also subscribe to my Substack. That's edmerison.substack.com. Feel free to leave a comment too. I'd love to know what you'd like to hear more of. But for now, I'd like to say thank you to Lucas James for the music, Neil Williams for the artwork, Elizabeth Clancy for the edits, and to my guest, Kathleen Quealy. Till next time, live wine to the fullest. Cheers!